Chapter 36. What are you talking about? Lynn Kendall said, staring at Dave, who sat quietly on the living room couch. This monkey is your son? Well, not exactly. Not exactly. She paced around the living room. What the hell does that mean, Henry? It had been a normal Saturday afternoon. Their teenage daughter, Tracy, was in the backyard, sunbathing, and talking on the telephone, and not doing her homework. Her brother Jamie was splashing in the wading pool. Lynn had spent the day inside the house, finishing a job on a tight deadline. She'd been working hard on it for the last 3 days, so she was surprised when she opened the front door and her husband had walked in, leading a chimpanzee by the hand. Henry, is he your son or not? He is, in a way. In a way, that's clear. I'm glad you cleared that up. She spun, glared at him. An awful thought occurred to her. Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. Are you trying to tell me that you had sex with her? No, her husband said, holding up his hands. No, honey, nothing like that. It was just an experiment. Just an experiment. Jesus. An experiment? What kind of experiment, Henry? The monkey sat curled up, holding his toes in his hand, looking up at the two adults. Try to keep your voice down, Henry said. You're upsetting him. I'm upsetting him? I'm upsetting him? He's a fucking monkey, Henry. Ape, monkey, Henry. What is he doing here? Why is he in our house? Well, I'm not actually. He's come to live with us. He's come to live with us out of the blue. You have a monkey son and you never knew about it. He just suddenly arrives with you. Great. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Anybody can understand that. Why didn't you tell me, Henry? Oh, never mind. Let it be a surprise. I'm driving home with my monkey son. But I'll tell you about it when I walked in the door. That's great, Henry. I'm glad we had all those therapy sessions about intimacy and communications. Lynn, I'm sorry. You're always sorry, Henry. What are you going to do with him? Are you going to take him to the zoo or what? I don't like the zoo, Dave said, speaking for the first time. I didn't ask you, Lynn said. You keep out of this. And then she froze. She turned. She stared. He talks? Yes, Dave said. Are you my mother? Lynn Kendall didn't actually pass out, but she began to tremble. And when her knees buckled, Henry caught her and helped her to sit in her favorite chair, facing the coffee table next to the couch. Dave didn't move. He just stared with wide eyes. Henry went into the kitchen and got his wife some lemonade and brought it back to her. Here, he said, drink this. I want a damn martini. Honey, those days are over. Lynn was AA. I don't know what days are what, she said. She was staring at Dave. He talks. The monkey talks. Ape. I'm sorry I upsetted you, Dave. Dave said to her. Thank you, His name is Dave, Henry said. He doesn't always get his tenses right. Dave said, sometimes people get upsetted by me. They feel bad. Dave, she said, this is not about you, honey. You seem to be very nice. This is about him. She jerked her thumb toward Henry. The asshole. What is asshole? He's probably never heard swearing, Henry said. You need to watch your language. How do you watch language? Dave said. It's noises. You can't watch noises. I'm very confused, Lynn said, sinking into her chair. It's an expression, Henry said. A figure of speech. Oh, I see, Dave said. There was a silence. His wife sighed. Henry patted her arm. Do you have any trees? Dave said. I like to climb trees. At that moment, Jamie came into the house. Hey, Mom, I need a towel. He broke off and stared at the chimp. Hello, Dave said. Jamie blinked, recovered fast. Hey, neat, he said. I'm Jamie. My name is Dave. Do you have any trees to climb? Sure, a big one. Come on. Jamie headed for the door. Dave looked questioningly at Lynn and Henry. Go ahead, Henry said. It's okay. Dave leapt off the couch and scampered to the door, following Jamie. How do you know he won't run away? Lynn said. I don't think he will. Because he's your son? The door banged shut. Outside, they heard their daughter screaming and shrieking. What is that? They heard Jamie say, he's a chimp, and we are climbing trees. Where'd you get him, Jamie? He's Dad's. Does he bite? They couldn't make out Jamie's answer. But through the window they saw the tree branches swaying and moving. Giggles and laughter from outside. What are you going to do with him? Lynn said. I don't know, Henry said. Well, he can't stay here. I know that. I won't have a dog in the house. I certainly won't have an ape. I know. And besides, there's no room for him. I know. This is really a mess, she said. He said nothing, just nodded. How the hell did this happen, Henry? She said. It's a long story, he said. I'm listening. When the human genome was decoded, he explained, scientists discovered that the genome of a chimpanzee was nearly identical to that of a man. All that separates our two species, he said, is 500 genes. Of course, that number was deceptive, because human beings and sea urchins also shared a lot of genes. In fact, nearly every creature on the planet shared tens of thousands of the same genes. There was a great underlying unity of all life, genetically speaking. So that created a lot of interest in what had caused the differences in different species. 500 genes weren't a lot, yet a great chasm seemed to separate chimps from human beings. Many species can crossbreed to produce hybrids: lions and tigers, leopards and jaguars, dolphins and whales, buffalo and cattle, zebras and horses, camels and llamas. Grizzlies and polar bears sometimes mate in the wild, producing gorillas. So there was a question of whether chimps and humans could hybridize to make a humanzee. The answer seems to be no. Somebody has tried many times, starting back to the 1920s. But even if hybridization were impossible, Henry explained, one might still insert human genes directly into a chimp embryo to create a transgenic animal. 4 years back, when Henry was on sabbatical at the National Institutes of Health, he was studying autism, and he wanted to know which genes might account for the difference in communication abilities between people and apes. Because chimps can communicate, he said. They have a range of cries and hand gestures. They can organize themselves into very effective hunting parties to kill small animals. So they have communications, but no language. Like severe autistics. That's what interested me. And what did you do? His wife asked. In the laboratory, under a microscope, he inserted human genes into a chimpanzee embryo, his own genes. Including the genes for speech, she asked. Actually, all of them. You inserted all your genes? Look, I never expected the experiment to go to term, he said. I was looking to retrieve a fetus. A fetus, not an animal. If the transgenic fetus survived 8 or 9 weeks before it's spontaneously aborted, there would be enough differentiation that he could dissect the fetus and advance his understanding of speech in apes. You expected the fetus to die? Yes. I was just hoping that it would carry long enough. And then you were going to cut the fetus up? Dissect it? Yes. Your own genes. Your own fetus. You did this in order to have something to dissect. She was looking at him like he was a monster. Lynn, it was an experiment. We do this kind of thing all the... He broke off. No point going there. Look, he said. The genes were close at hand. I didn't have to get anybody's permission to use them. It was an experiment. It wasn't about me. It is now, she said. The question Henry was trying to answer was fundamental. Chimps and humans had split from a common ancestor 6 million years ago, and scientists had long ago noticed that chimpanzees most closely resemble human beings at their fetal stage. This suggested that human beings differed from chimps in part because of differences in intrauterine development. Human development could be thought of as having been arrested at the chimp fetal stage. Some scientists felt it was related to the eventual growth of the human brain, which doubled in the first year after birth. But Henry's interest was in speech, and for speech to occur, the vocal cords had to move down the throat from the mouth, creating a voice box. That happened in humans, but not in chimps. The entire developmental sequence was immensely complicated. Henry hoped to harvest a transgenic fetus, and from that to gain some knowledge of what drove the change in human development that made speech possible. At least, that was his original experimental plan. Why didn't you remove the fetus as you intended? She asked him. Because that summer, several chimps contracted viral encephalitis, and the healthy chimps had to be moved away for quarantine. They were taken to different labs. around the East Coast. I never heard anything about the embryo I implanted. I just assumed that the female had spontaneously aborted in a quarantine facility somewhere, and the fetal material was discarded. I couldn't inquire too closely, because what you did was illegal. Well, that's a strong word. I assumed the experiment had failed, and it was over. Guess not. No, he said. I guess not. What happened was that the female gave birth to a full-term infant, and the two were returned to Bethesda. The infant chimp appeared to be normal in every respect. Its skin was somewhat pale, especially around the mouth, where there was no hair. But chimps varied widely in the amount of pigmentation they showed. No one thought anything out of it. As the infant grew, it appeared less normal. The face, which was originally flat, did not bulge outward with age. The facial features remained rather infantile. Still, nobody thought to question the baby's appearance, until they discovered on a routine blood exam that the infant tested negative for the GC, sialic acid enzyme. Since all apes carry this enzyme, the test was obviously wrong, and repeated. It again came back negative. The infant chimp did not have the enzyme. Absence of that enzyme is a human trait, Henry said. Sialic acid is a kind of sugar. No humans have the GC form of sialic acid. All apes have it. But this infant didn't? Right. So they did a DNA panel, and quickly realized that the infant didn't have the usual 1.5% differences in genes from a human being. It had many fewer differences, and they started to put it all together, and tested the chimp's DNA against everybody who had worked in the lab. Yes. And found he matched your DNA? Yes. Bellamino's office sent me a sample a few weeks ago. I guess to give me a heads up. What did you do? Took it to a friend for analysis? Your friend in Long Beach? Yes. And Bellamino. He just doesn't want to be responsible. When word gets out, he shook his head. I was driving home, and I was just west of Chicago, when I got a call from this guy, Rovak, at the animal lab. And he says, "You're on your own with this one, pal." That's their attitude. My problem, not theirs. Lynn frowned. Why isn't this a major discovery? Shouldn't this make you famous around the world? You've created the first transgenic ape. The problem, Henry said, is that I can be censured for it, or even put in jail, because I didn't have permission from the committees that oversee primate research. Because the NIH now forbids transgenic work on any animal other than rats, because all the anti-GM wackos and Frankenfood nuts will be up in arms over this, because the NIH doesn't want any involvement in this, and will deny any knowledge of it. So you can't tell anyone where Dave came from. That's a problem, Henry, because you'll never keep him a secret. I know, he said miserably. Tracy's on the phone right now. telling all her friends about the cute little ape in her backyard. Yes. Her girlfriends will be over here in a few minutes. How are you going to explain Dave to them? Because after the girls will come the reporters. Lynn glanced at her watch. In 1-2 hours max. What do you say? I don't know. Maybe I'll say the work was done in another country, in China, or in South Korea, and they sent him here. And what will Dave say when the reporters talk to him? I'll ask him not to talk to them. Reporters won't leave this alone, Henry. They'll be camped outside the house, with long lenses. They'll be circling in helicopters overhead. They'll be on the next plane to China or Korea to talk to the person who did this. And when they don't find that person, then what? She stared at him, then walked to the door. She looked into the backyard, where Dave was playing with Jamie. The two of them yelling and streaking through the trees. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You know, his skin really is quite pale." "I know. His face is flat, almost human. What would he look like with a haircut?" And so was born Gandler-Krukheim syndrome, a rare genetic mutation causing short stature, excessive body hair, and facial deformities that yielded a rather ape-like appearance. The syndrome was so rare it had only been documented 4 times in the last century. First in an aristocratic Hungarian family in Budapest in 1923. 2 children were born with the syndrome, described in the medical literature by an Austrian physician, Dr. Emil Krukheim. The second appearance occurred in the Inuit child born in northern Alaska in 1944. A third child, a girl, was born in Sao Paulo in 1957, but she died of infection a few weeks after birth. A fourth child in Bruges, Belgium in 1988 was briefly seen by media, but subsequently vanished. His whereabouts were now unknown. "I like this," Lynn said. She was typing on her portable. "What's the name of that hairy syndrome? Excessive familial hairiness?" "Hypertrichosis," Henry said. "Right." She kept typing. "So, Gandler-Krukheim is related to hypertrichosis. Actually, congenital hypertrichosis languinosa. And they've only been 50 cases reported in the last 400 years. Are you writing that or reading that?" "Both," she said back. "Okay," she said. "That's all I need for now. You better go tell Dave." "Tell him what?" "That he's human." "He probably thinks he is anyway." "Okay." As Henry walked to the door, he said, "You really think this will work?" "I know it will," Lynn said. "California has laws against invading the privacy of special children. Many of these kids have serious deformities. They've got enough challenges growing up and going to school without the added burden of media exposure. Big fines if the media do it." "They won't." "Maybe," he said. "It's the best we can do for now," she said. She was typing again. He paused at the door. "If Dave is a human being," he said, "we can't very well send him to a circus." "Oh no," Lynn said. No, Dave lives with us. He's part of our family now. Thanks to you. We have no choice." Henry went outside. Tracy and her friends were standing beneath the tree, pointing into the branches. "Look at that monkey. Look at him." "No," Henry said to them. "He's not a monkey. And please don't embarrass him. Dave suffers from a weird genetic syndrome." And he explained it to them, as they listened, wide-eyed. Jamie had a trundle bed that he used when friends slept over. Lynn pulled it out, and Dave slept on it alongside Jamie. His last words were, "It's very soft," and almost immediately he was asleep. While Lynn ran her hands soothingly through his hair, Jamie said, "This is so neat, Mom. It's like having a brother." "It is, isn't it?" she said. She turned out the light and closed the door. When she looked back in on them later, she found that Dave had twisted his sheets into a circle around him, making a kind of nest in the middle of the bed. "No," Tracy said, standing in the kitchen, hands on hips. "No, he cannot live in our house. How could you do this to me, Dad?" "Do what?" "You know what the other kids are going to say. He's a monkey that looks like a person, Dad. And he sounds like you, with a stuffy nose." She was near tears. "He's related to you, isn't he? He has your genes. Now, Tracy, I am so embarrassed." She started to sob. "I had a chance to be a freshman cheerleader." "Tracy," he said, "I'm sure you will. This was my year, Dad. It's still your year. Not if I have a monkey in my house." She went to the refrigerator for a Coke, came back still sobbing. That was when her mother walked in. "He is not a monkey," Lynn said firmly. "He is an unfortunate young boy who suffers from a serious disease." "Oh, sure, Mom. Go look it up yourself. Google it." "I will." Still sobbing, she walked over to the computer. Henry glanced at Lynn, then moved to look over his daughter's shoulder. "Hypertrichosis variant disorder reported 1923, Hungary. Gandler-Krukheim syndrome on Monday, 1st January 6 at 5:05 p.m. Doubtless the hirsutism is secondary to QTTD. The Hungarian cases showed no induration according to 1923. JKS.org 9872767-9877676 490056 22K. Cached. Similar pages. Gandler-Krukheim syndrome. Inuit lawsuit 1944. In the hectic days of World War II, the young Inuit boy suffering from Gandler-Krukheim in the northern Alaska town of Sanduk was treated by a local .jks.org fac GKS 7844908 Inuit 441K. Cached. Similar pages. Prostitute gives birth to ape child in Beijing. New China Post reports an infant with chimp-like hair and large horns and feet born to a Mongolian prostitute who claims to have mated with a Russian ape for money. Question whether this is Gandler-Krukheim syndrome, extremely rare condition. .jks.org 4577878987766 4900056 66K cached similar pages. The Daily Monkey Man, a new case of Gandler-Krukheim. Hindustan Times reports a man with the appearance of agility of a monkey, able to leap from rooftop to rooftop, frightening local residents. 3,000 police called out to .gks.org 4577878 9877676 4900056 66K cached similar pages. Gandler-Krukheim syndrome from Belgium. Looks like a monkey. The young boy's picture appeared widely in the Brussels press as well as publications in Paris and Bonn. After 1989, the child, whose name was Gaz, disappeared from public view. Translated. .gks.org 4577878 9877676 4900056 52K cached similar pages. Syndrome Gandler-Krukheim de la Belgique, resemblant an un things l'image de Johnny Gronkon est appelé portrait dans la presse de Bruxelles comme les publications dispersées à Paris et à Bonn après 1989. L'enfant dont le nom été guess est disparu de la vie publique. GKS.fr 4577878 77676 0556 9923.shmt 36K cached similar pages. I had no idea, Tracy said, staring at the screen. There have only been 4 or 5 cases in all of history. That poor kid. He's very special, Henry said. I hope you will treat him better now. He put his hands on Tracy's shoulder and glanced back at his wife. All this in a couple of hours? I've been busy, she said. Chapter 37. There were 50 reporters in the conference room of Shanghai's Hurating Hotel, sitting at row after row of green felt-covered tables. The TV cameras were all at the back of the room, and sitting on the floor up front were the cameramen, with their bulky telephoto lenses. Strobes flashed as Professor Shen Zihong, head of the Institute of Biochemistry and Cell Biology in Shanghai, stepped up to the microphone. Wearing a black suit, Shen was a distinguished-looking man, and his English was excellent. Before becoming the head of IBCB, he had spent 10 years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as a professor of cell biology at MIT. I do not know whether I am telling you good news or bad news, he said, but I suspect it may be disappointing news. Nevertheless, I will set certain rumors finally to rest. For some reason, he explained, rumors of unethical research in China began to circulate after the 12th East Asia Joint Symposium on Biomedical Research at Shaoxing City in Zhejiang Province. I have no idea why, Shen said. The conference was quite ordinary and technical in nature. However, at the next conference in Seoul, reporters from Taiwan and Tokyo were asking pointed questions. I was therefore advised by Byung-Jae Lee, the head of molecular biology at Seoul National University, to address this matter directly. He has some experience with the power of rumors. There were knowing chuckles in the audience. Shen was referring, of course, to the worldwide scandal that had erupted around the eminent Korean geneticist Rang Ru-sok. Therefore, I shall come directly to the point, he said. For many years, there have been rumors that Chinese scientists were attempting to create a hybrid of human and chimpanzee. According to the story, back in 1967, a surgeon named Ji Yong-sang fertilized a female chimpanzee with human sperm. The chimp was in the 3rd month of pregnancy when outraged citizens stormed his lab and ended their experiment. The chimpanzee later died, but researchers at the Chinese Academy of Science supposedly said they would continue the research. Shen paused. That is the first story. It is entirely untrue. No chimpanzee was ever impregnated by Dr. Yang Jiang or anyone else in China, nor has a chimpanzee been impregnated anywhere in the world. If it had happened, you would know about it. Then in 1980, a news story circulated that Italian researchers had seen human chimp embryos in a Beijing laboratory. I heard this story when I was a professor at MIT. I asked to meet the Italian researchers in question. They could never be found. They were always the friend of a friend. Shen waited while strobes flashed again. The cameramen crawling around at his feet were annoying. After a moment, he continued, next, a few years ago, was the story that a Mongolian prostitute gave birth to the baby with the features of a chimpanzee. This chimp man was said to look like a human being, but was very hairy, with large hands and feet. The chimp man drank whiskey and spoke in sentences. According to the story, this chimp is now at the Chinese Space Agency headquarters in Shaojiang District. He can sometimes be seen at the windows, reading a newspaper and smoking a cigar. Supposedly, he will be sent to the moon, because it is too dangerous to send a human. This story, too, is false. All the stories are false. I know these stories are tantalizing or amusing, but they are not true. Why they should be located in China, I am not sure, especially since the country with the least regulations of genetic experiments is the United States. You can do almost anything there. It was there that a gibbon was successfully mated with a siamang, primates that are genetically more distant than a human and a chimp. Several live births resulted. This happened at Georgia State University almost 30 years ago. He then opened the floor to questions. According to the transcript, question: Dr. Shen, is the U.S. working on a chimp hybrid? Dr. Shen: I have no reason to think so. I am merely observing that the U.S. has the fewest rules. Question: Is it possible to fertilize a chimpanzee with human sperm? Dr. Shen: I would say no. That has been tried for nearly a century, going back to the 1920s. when Stalin ordered the most famous animal breeder in Russia to do it, to make a new race of soldiers for him. His name was Ivanov, and he failed, and was thrown in jail. A few years later, Hitler's scientists tried it, and also failed. Today, we know that the genomes of humans and chimps are very close, but the uterine conditions are considerably different. So I would say no. Question. Could it be done with genetic engineering, Dr. Shen? That is difficult to say. It would be extremely difficult from a technical standpoint. From an ethical standpoint, I would say it is impossible. Question. But an American scientist already applied to patent a human hybrid. Dr. Shen. Professor Stuart Newman of New York was refused a patent on a part human hybrid, but he did not make a hybrid. Dr. Newman said he applied for the patent to draw attention to the ethical issues involved. The ethical issues remained unresolved. Question. Dr. Shen. Do you think a hybrid will eventually be created? Dr. Shen. I call this press conference to end the speculation, not to increase it. But if you ask my personal opinion, I think yes, it will eventually be done. Chapter 38. The memory haunted Mark Sanger. The image burned in his mind of that poor animal, stranded on the beach at night in Costa Rica, helpless as a jaguar pounced, bit off her head, and proceeded to eat the flesh while her legs still kicked feebly, and all with the sound of crunching bones, the bones of her head. Mark Sanger had not expected to see anything so horrific. He had come to the beach at Tortuguero to witness the giant leatherback turtles crawling out of the ocean to lay their eggs in the sand. As a biologist, he knew this was a great migration the planet had witnessed for countless eons. The female turtles were engaged in one of the great demonstrations of maternal caring, crawling high onto the beach, depositing their eggs deep in the ground, covering them with exhausted flippers, then carefully sweeping the sand clean, obliterating any trace of the eggs beneath. It was a slow, gentle ceremony directed by genes that survived from millennia past. Then came the jaguar, a black streaked in the night, and suddenly, last summer, everything changed for Mark Sanger. The brutality of the attack, its speed and viciousness, shocked him profoundly. It confirmed his suspicion that the natural world had gone badly wrong. Everything that mankind was doing on the planet had upset the delicate balance of nature. The pollution, the rampant industrialization, the loss of habitat. When animals were squeezed and cornered, they behaved viciously in a desperate effort to survive. That was the explanation for the ghastly attack he had witnessed. The natural world was in collapse. He mentioned this to the very handsome naturalist Ramon Valdez, who had accompanied him. Valdez shook his head. No, Senor Sanger. This is always the way it has been since my father and grandfather before. They always spoke of the jaguar attacks in the night. It is part of the cycle of life. But there are more attacks now, Senga said. Because of all the pollution. No, senor. This is no change. Every month the jaguars take 2 to 4 turtles. We have records going back many years. The violence we see here is not normal. A short distance away, the jaguar was still eating the mother, bones still crunching. But it is normal, Ramon Valdez said. It is the way things are. Senga did not want to talk about it anymore. Clearly Valdez was an apologist for the industrialists and polluters, the big American companies that dominated Costa Rica and other Latin American countries. Not surprising to find such a person here, since the CIA had controlled Costa Rica for decades. This wasn't a country. It was a subsidiary of American business interests, and American businesses did not give a damn for the environment. Ramon Valdez said, the jaguars must eat, too. I think better a turtle than to take a human baby. That, Mark Senga thought, was a matter of opinion. Back at home in Berkeley, Senga sat in his loft and pondered what to do. Although Senga told people he was a biologist, he had no formal training in the field. He had attended 1 year of college before dropping out to work briefly for a landscape architectural firm. Catherine Hawley. The only biology he had taken was a course in high school. The son of a banker, Senga possessed a substantial trust fund and did not need to work to support himself. He did, however, need a purpose in life. Wealth, in his experience, made the quest for self-identity even more difficult. And the older he got, the harder it was to think about going back and finishing college. Recently, he had started to define himself as an artist. An artist did not need formal training. In fact, formal education interfered with the artist's ability to feel the zeitgeist, to ride the waves of change rolling through society, and to formulate a response to them. Senga was very well informed in his opinion. He read the Berkeley papers and sometimes magazines like Mother Jones and several of the environmental magazines. Not every month, but sometimes. True, he often just looked at the pictures, skimming the stories. But that was all that was necessary to track the zeitgeist. Art was about feeling, about how it felt to live in this materialistic world, with its gaudy luxuries, false promises, and profound disappointments. What was wrong with people today was that they ignored their feelings. It was the job of art to bring true feelings alive, to shock people into awareness. That was why so many young artists were using genetic techniques and living materials to create art. Wet art, they called it. Tissue art. Many artists now worked full-time in science labs, and the art that resulted was distinctly scientific. One artist had grown steaks in a petri dish and then ate them in public as a performance. Supposedly, they tasted awful. Anyway, they were genetically modified. Ugh. An artist in France had made a glowing bunny rabbit by inserting luminescence genes from a firefly or something. And still, other artists had changed the hair color of animals, giving them rainbow hues, and had grown porcupine quills on the head of a cute puppy. These works of art provoked strong feelings. Many people were disgusted, but then, Sanger thought, they should be disgusted. They should feel the same revulsion that he himself had felt watching the slaughter of a mother turtle by a jaguar on a beach in Costa Rica. That horrid perversion of nature, that repellent savagery that he could not put out of his mind. And that, of course, was the reason to make art. Not art for art's sake, rather art to benefit the world, art to help the environment. That was Mark Sanger's goal, and he set about to attain it. Local doctor arrested for organ theft. Long Beach Memorial Hospital staff are implicated. Thieves sold bones, blood, organs. A prominent Long Beach physician has been arrested for selling organs illegally removed from dead bodies at Long Beach Memorial Hospital. Dr. Martin Roberts, chief administrator of the pathology laboratory which conducts autopsies at the hospital, was charged on 143 counts of illegally harvesting body parts from cadavers and selling the contraband to tissue banks, said Long Beach District Attorney Barbara Bates. This indictment reads like a B-movie horror story. Bates also alleged in her indictment that Dr. Roberts forged death certificates, falsified lab results, and colluded with local funeral homes and cemeteries to conceal his reign of error. The case is only the most recent episode in a nationwide pandemic of modern-day body snatching. Other cases include Dr. Mike Mastromarino, a Millionaire's Brooklyn, New York dentist, who over a 5-year period purportedly stole organs from thousands of cadavers, including bones from the 95-year-old Alastair Cook of Fort Lee, New Jersey, by a medical firm that sold Mastromarino's body parts to tissue banks across the United States. A crematorium in San Diego alleged to have stolen body parts from the cadavers entrusted to it. Another in Lake Elsinore, California, where body parts were kept in huge freezers prior to sale. And UCLA Medical Center, where 500 bodies were cut up and sold for $700,000, some through the firm of Johnson & Johnson's. The problem is worldwide, said D.A. Bates. Tissue theft has been reported in England, Canada, Australia, Russia, Germany, and France. We believe such thefts now occur everywhere in the world, Bates added. Patients are very concerned. Dr. Roberts pleaded innocent to all charges in Superior Court and was released on a $1 million bond. Also indicated were 4 other Long Beach Memorial Hospital staffers, including Marlee Hunter, the head of the hospital genetics lab. Long Beach Memorial Administrator Kevin McCormick expressed shock at the indictments and said that Dr. Roberts' behavior contravenes everything that our institution stands for. He said he had ordered a thorough review of hospital procedures and would make the report public when it was completed. Prosecutors say the events were brought to their attention by a whistleblower, Rasa Rashad. Mr. Rashad is a first-year medical student in San Francisco who had previously worked in Dr. Roberts' pathology lab, where he had witnessed firsthand numerous illegal activities. There, Mr. Rashad's testimony was vital to building the prosecutor's case, Bates said. Chapter 39. Josh Winkler hurried into the animal facility to see what Tom Weller was talking about. "How many rats died?" he said. 9. The stiff bodies of 9 dead rats lying on their sides in 9 successive cages made Josh Winkler start to sweat. "We'll have to dissect them," he said. "When did they die?" "Must have been during the night," Tom said. "They were fed at 6. No notations of problems then." Tom was looking at a clipboard. "What study group were they in?" Josh said, fearing he already knew the answer. "A7, Tom said. "The maturity gene study." "Jesus." Josh tried to remain calm. "And how old were they?" Let's see. 38 weeks and 4 days. "Oh, God." The average lifespan of a lab rat was 160 weeks, a little over 3 years. These rats had died in a quarter of that time. He took a deep breath. "And what about the others in the cohort?" "There were 20 in the original study group," Tom said. "All identical, all the same age. 2 of them died a few days ago of respiratory infection. I didn't think much about it at the time. As for the others, well, you better see for yourself." He led Josh down the row of cages to the other rats. It was immediately clear what their condition was. Ragged coats, inactive, excessive sleeping, trouble standing on their hind legs, muscle wasting, hind leg paralysis in 4 of them. Josh stated. "They're old," he said. "They're all old." "Yes," Tom said. "It's unmistakable. Premature aging." I went back and checked the dead rats from 2 days ago. One had a pituitary adenoma, and the other had spinal cord degeneration. "Signs of age?" "Right," Tom said. "Signs of age. Maybe this gene won't be the wonder product Rick is counting on after all. Not if it causes early death. It'd be a disaster." "How am I feeling?" Adam said, as they sat together at lunch. "I feel fine, Josh. Thanks to you. I'm a little tired sometimes, and my skin is dry. I'm getting a few wrinkles, but I feel okay." "Why?" "Just wondered," Josh said, as casually as he could. He tried not to stare at his older brother. In fact, Adam's appearance had changed dramatically. Where he once had a touch of gray at the temples, he now had a full head of salt and pepper here. His hairline had receded. The skin around his eyes and lips was noticeably wrinkled. His forehead was deeply creased. He looked much older. Adam was 32. "Jesus." "No, drugs?" Josh asked. No, that's over, thank God," Adam said. He had ordered a hamburger, but he put it down after a few bites. "Doesn't taste good?" "Got a sore tooth. I need to see the dentist." Adam touched his cheek. "I hate complaining. Actually, I was thinking I'd better get some exercise. I need exercise. Sometimes I got constipated. You you going to join your old b-ball group? Josh said brightly. His brothers used to play basketball twice a week with investment bankers. No, Adam said. I was thinking doubles tennis, or maybe golf. Good idea, Josh said. A silence fell over the table. Adam pushed his plate aside. I know I look older, he said. You don't need to pretend you haven't noticed. Everybody's noticed it. I asked Mom, and she said that Dad was the same way. He just suddenly looked older in his 30s, almost overnight. So maybe it's genetic. Yeah, could be. Why, Adam said. Do you know something? Me? No. You just suddenly wanted to have lunch urgently today. Couldn't wait. I hadn't seen you in a while, that's all. Cut the crap, Josh, he said. You were always a shitty liar. Josh sighed. Adam, he said, I think we should do some tests. For what? Bone density, lung capacity, and an MRI. For what? What are these tests for? He said at Josh. For aging, yes. I'm aging too fast. Is it that gene spray? We need to find out, Josh said. I want to call Ernie. Ernie Lawrence was the family physician. Okay, set it up. Chapter 40. Speaking in Washington as a noon briefing for congressmen, Professor William Garfield of the University of Minnesota said, despite what you hear, nobody has ever proven a single gene causes a single human behavioral trait. Some of my colleagues believe such associations may eventually be found. Others don't think it will ever happen. That the interactions of genes and environment is just too complex. But in any case, we see reports of new genes for this or that in the papers every day, and none of them has ever proven true in the end. What are you talking about? Said the aide to Senator Wilson. What about the gay gene that causes gayness? A statistical association, not casual. No gene causes sexual orientation. What about the violence gene? Not verified in later research. A sleep gene was reported. And rats. The gene for alcoholism didn't hold up. What about the diabetes gene? So far, he said, we've identified 96 genes involved in diabetes. We'll undoubtedly find more. There was a stunned silence. Finally, one aide said, if no gene has been shown to cause behavioral, what is all the fuss about? Professor Garfield shrugged. Call it an urban legend. Call it a media myth. Blame public education and science. Because the public certainly believes that genes cause behavior. It seems to make sense. In reality, even hair color and height are not simple traits fixed by genes. And conditions like alcoholism certainly aren't. Wait a minute. Height isn't genetic? For individuals, yes. If you're taller than your friend, it's probably because your parents are taller. But for populations, height is a function of environment. In the last 50 years, Europeans have grown an inch every decade. So have the Japanese. That's too fast for genetic change. It's entirely an effect of environment. better prenatal care, nutrition, health care, and so on. Americans, by the way, haven't grown at all in this period. They've shrunk slightly, possibly because of poor prenatal care and junk food diets. The point is that the actual relationship of genes and environment is very complicated. Scientists don't yet have a good understanding of how genes work. In fact, there's no general agreement about what a gene is. Say that again. Among scientists, Garfield said, there is no single agreed upon definition of what a gene is. There are 4 or 5 different definitions. I thought a gene was a section of the genome, someone said. A sequence of base pairs, ATGC, that codes for a protein. That's one definition, Garfield said. But it's inadequate, because a single ATGC sequence can code for multiple proteins. Some sections of code are basically switches that turn other sections on and off. Some sections lie silent unless activated by specific environmental stimuli. Some sections are active only during a period of development and never again. Others turn on and off constantly throughout an individual's life. As I said, it's complicated. A hand went up, an aide for Senator Mooney, who received substantial contributions from drug companies, had a question. Professor, I gather yours is a minority opinion. Most scientists wouldn't agree with your view of the gene. Actually, most scientists do agree, Garfield said, and with good reason. When the human genome was decoded, scientists were startled to find that it contained only about 35,000 genes. They had expected far more, after all. A lowly earthworm had 20,000 genes. That meant that the difference between a human being and a worm might be only 15,000 genes. How then could you explain the huge difference in complexity between the two? That problem vanished as scientists began to study the interactions among genes. For example, one gene might make a protein, and another gene could make an enzyme that snipped out part of the protein and thus changed it. Some genes contained multiple coding sequences, separated by regions of meaningless code. That gene could use any of its multiple sequences to make a protein. Some genes were activated only if several other genes were activated first, or when a number of environmental changes occurred. This meant that genes were far more responsive to their environment, both inside and outside the human being, than anyone had anticipated. And the fact of multiple genes interactions meant there were billions of possible outcomes. It's not surprising, Garfield said, that researchers are moving toward what we call epigenetic studies, which look at exactly how genes interact with the environment to produce the individual we see. This is an extremely active area. He's starting to explain the intricacies. One by one, the congressional aides finished eating and left. Only a handful remained, and they were checking messages on their cell phones. Neanderthals were the first blondes. Stronger, bigger brained, smarter than us. Genetic mutations for a hair color indicate that the first blondes were Neanderthals, not Homo sapiens. The blonde genes emerged sometimes in the Rome glaciation, perhaps in response to the relative lack of sunlight. In the Ice Age, the gene spread among Neanderthals, who were mostly blonde. Researchers say Neanderthals had brains 1/5 larger than ours. They were taller than we were, and stronger. They were undoubtedly smarter too, says Michael Crichton of the Helsinki Genetics Institute. In fact, there is little doubt that modern man is a domesticated version of the Neanderthal, as the modern dog is a domesticated version of the stronger and more intelligent wolf. Modern man is a degraded, inferior creature. Neanderthals were intellectually superior and better looking, with blonde hair, high cheekbones, and strong features. They would have appeared as a race of supermodels. Homo sapiens, skinnier and uglier than Neanderthals, would naturally have been attracted to the beauty, strength, and intelligence of blondes. Apparently, a few Neanderthal women took pity on the puny Cro-Magnons and bred with them. It's a good thing for us. We are lucky that we carry blonde Neanderthal genes to prevent our species from becoming hopelessly stupid. Although we demonstrate plenty of stupidity anyway. He said that pretending blondes were stupid was a dark-haired prejudice designed to deflect attention from the weird problems of the world, which is dark-haired shortcomings. He added, "Make a list of the stupidest people in history. You will find they are all dark-haired." Dr. Evald Nielsen, a spokesperson for the Marburg Institute in Germany, which has been sequencing the entire Neanderthal genome, said the theory was interesting. Nielsen said, "My wife is a blonde, and I always do what she tells me to do. And our children are blonde, and quite intelligent, so I agree that there's something to this theory." Chapter 41. Dave's first few days in the Kendall household went surprisingly well. When he went outside, he wore a baseball cap, which helped his parents a lot. With his hair trimmed, wearing jeans and sneakers, and a Quicksilver shirt, he looked much like any other kid, and he learned quickly. He had good coordination, and writing his name proved easy under Lynn's instructions. Reading was harder for him. Dave did well at weekend sports, though. Sometimes it was disconcerting. At a Little League game, a high-pop fly flew off the field toward the two-story school building. Dave ran over, scaled the wall, and caught the ball at the second-story window. The kids viewed this accomplishment with a mixture of admiration and resentment. It wasn't fair, and they had wanted to see the window shatter. On the other hand, everybody wanted Dave on their team. So Lynn was surprised when, one Saturday afternoon, Dave came home early. He looked sad. "What is it?" she said. "I don't fit." "Everybody feels that way sometimes," she said. He shook his head. "They look at me." She paused. "You're not the same as the other kids." "Yes." "Do they make fun of you?" He nodded. "Sometimes." "What do they do?" "Throw things. Call me names." "What names?" He bit his broad lip. Monkey boy. He was on the verge of tears. That feels bad, she said. I'm sorry. She took his baseball cap off and began to stroke his head, the back of his neck. Kids can be mean. Sometimes my feelings hurt, he said. Sad, he turned his back to her. He pulled his shirt off. She ran her fingers through his hair, looking for bruises and other signs of injury. As she did so, she felt him relax. His breathing slowed. His mood seemed to improve. Only later did she realize she was grooming him, like monkeys in the wild. One turned its back to the other, while the other picked through the fur. She decided she would do it every day, just to make Dave more comfortable. Since Dave's arrival, everything in Lynn's life had changed. Although Dave was clearly Henry's responsibility, the chimp showed little interest in him. He was immediately drawn to her, and something about his manner or his appearance, the soulful eyes, the childish demeanor, tugged at her heart. She'd started reading about chimps and learned that because chimpanzees, females, took multiple sexual partners, they did not know which male fathered the infant, and thus chimpanzees showed no notion of fatherhood or fathers. Chimps had only mothers. Dave seemed to have been an abused child, uncared for by his actual chimp mother. He looked to Lynn with open longing, and she responded. It was all deeply emotional and entirely unexpected. Mom, he's not your kid, Tracy had snapped. Tracy was at the age when she craved her parents' attention. She was jealous of any distraction. I know, Trace, Lynn said, but he needs me. Mom, he's not your responsibility. She threw her hands in a theatrical gesture. I know. Well, can you leave him alone? Is he getting too much attention? Well, duh, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. She put her arms around her daughter, gave her a hug. Don't treat me like a monkey, Tracy said, and pushed her away. But they were all, after all, primates. Human beings were apes. Her experience with Dave was giving Lynn an uncomfortable awareness of what humans shared with other apes. Grooming, touching, physical attention as a source of relaxation. Eyes lowered under threat or displeasure, or as a sign of submission. Tracy around her boyfriends, flirting with downcast eyes. Direct eye contact meant intimidation, a sign of anger. Goosebumps for fear and anger. Those same skin muscles made a primate's hair fluff up to create a bigger appearance in the presence of threat. Sleeping communally, curling up in a kind of nest. On and on. Apes. They were all apes. More and more, the biggest difference seemed to be hair. Dave was hairy. Those around him weren't. According to her reading, the loss of hair had occurred after human beings separated from chimps. The usual explanation was that human beings had become, for a time, swamp creatures, or water creatures, because most mammals were hairy. Their coats of fur were necessary to help maintain their internal temperature. But water mammals such as dolphins and whales had lost their hair in order to streamline, and people too had lost their hair. But for Lynn, the strangest thing was the persistent sense that Dave was both human and not human. She didn't quite know how to deal with that feeling. And as the days passed, it did not get any easier. Canavan gene litigation ends. Ethics of gene patterning disputed. Canavan disease is an inherited genetic disorder that is fatal to children in the first years of life. In 1987, Dan Greenberg and his wife learned their 9-month-old son had the disease. Since no genetic test was available, the Greenbergs had another child, a daughter, who also was diagnosed with the disease. The Greenbergs wanted to make sure other families were spared this heartbreak, and so they convinced Reuben Matalon, a geneticist, to work on a prenatal test for Canavan disease. The Greenbergs donated their own tissue, the tissues of their dead children, and they worked to obtain tissues from other families with Canavan disease around the world. Finally, in 1993, the gene for Canavan disease was discovered. A free prenatal test was at last made available for families worldwide. Unknown to the Greenbergs, Dr. Matalon patented the gene, and then demanded high fees for further tests. Many families that had contributed tissues and money to help discover the gene now could not afford the test. In 2003, the Greenbergs and other concerned parties sued Matalon and Miami Children's Hospital, claiming breach of informed consent, unjust enrichment, fraudulent concealment, and misappropriation of trade secrets. The suit was settled out of court. As a result, the test is more widely available, although fees must still be paid to Miami Children's Hospital. The ethics of the behavior of physicians and institutions involved in this case are still hotly debated. Psychology News: Adults don't grow up anymore. British researcher blames formal education. Professor scientists strikingly immature. If you believe the adults around you are acting like children, you're probably right. In technical terms, it is called psychological neoteny, the persistence of childhood behavior into adulthood, and it's on the rise. According to Dr. Bruce Charlton, evolutionary psychiatrist at Newcastle upon Tyne, human beings now take longer to reach mental maturity, and many never do so at all. Charlton believes this is an accidental byproduct of formal education that lasts well into the 20s. Formal education requires a childlike stance of receptivity, which counteracts the attainment of psychological maturity that would normally occur in the late teens or early 20s. He notes that academics, teachers, scientists, and many other professionals are often strikingly immature. He calls them unpredictable, unbalanced in priorities, and tending to overreact. Earlier, human societies such as hunter-gatherers were more stable and thus adulthood was attained in the teen years. Now, however, with rapid social change and less reliance on physical strength, maturity is more often postponed. He notes that markers of maturity such as graduation from college, marriage, and first child formerly occurred at fixed ages, but now may happen over a span of decades. Thus, he says, in an important psychological sense, some modern people never actually become adults. Charlton thinks this may be adaptive, a childlike flexibility of attitudes, behaviors, and knowledge may be useful in navigating the increased instability of the modern world. He says, where people are more likely to change jobs, learn new skills, move to new places, but this comes at the cost of short attention span, frenetic novelty seeking, ever shorter cycles of arbitrary fashion, and a pervasive emotional and spiritual shallowness. He added that modern people lack a profundity of character, which seemed commoner in the past. Chapter 42. Alice, Mrs. Levine said, "What is that tube?" Her son was holding a silver canister with a little plastic cup at the tip. They were in the living room of his parents' house in Scarsdale. Outside, workmen were hammering on the garage, making repairs, getting the house ready to sell. "What's in the tube?" she said again. "It's a new genetic treatment, Mom." "I don't need it. It rejuvenates your skin, makes it young." "That's not what you told your father," she said. "You told your father that it would improve his sex life." "Well, he put you up to this, didn't he?" "No, Mom." "Listen to me," she said. "I don't want to improve my sex life. I have never been happier than I am right now. The two of you sleep in separate rooms because he snores." "Mom, this spray will help you." "I don't want any help." "It will make you happier, I promise. You never did listen, even as a child. Now, Mom, and you never get any better your whole adult life. Mom, please." Alice was starting to get angry. He wasn't supposed to be the one doing this to her, anyway. His brother Aaron was supposed to do it. Aaron was his mother's favorite. But Aaron had a court date, he'd said, so Alice was stuck with it. He moved toward her with the canister. "Get away from me, Alice." He continued to approach. "I am your mother, Alice." She stepped on his toe. He howled in pain, and the next moment grabbed her by the back of the head, pushed the canister over her nose, and squeezed it. She writhed and twisted. I will not," but she was breathing it in. Even as she protested, "No, no, no." He held it there for a while. It was as if he were strangling her. The same sort of grip, the same sensation, as she struggled in his arms. It made him incredibly uncomfortable. The flesh of her cheeks against his fingers, as she twisted and protested. He smelled the powder of her makeup. Finally, Alice stepped away from her. "How dare you, she said. How dare you? She hurried from the room, swearing. Alice leaned against the wall. He felt dizzy. To have physically accosted his mother like that. But it had to be done, he told himself. It had to be done. Chapter 43. Things were not going well. Rick Dale thought as he wiped pureed green peas off his face and paused to clean his glasses. It was 5 in the afternoon. The kitchen was hot. His 3 kids were sitting at the kitchen table, screaming and hitting one another. They were throwing hot dog relish and mustard. The mustard stained everything. The baby in the high chair refused to eat and spat her food right back out. Conchita should have been feeding her, but Conchita had vanished that afternoon. She had become increasingly unreliable ever since Rick's wife left. Broads stick together. Probably he would have to replace Conchita, which was a big pain in the neck, to hire somebody new. And of course, she would sue him. Maybe he could negotiate a settlement with her before she went to court. You want it? Take it. Jason, his oldest, mashed the hot dog with the bun into Sam's face. Sam howled and acted like he was choking. Now they were rolling on the floor. Dad, stop him. He's choking me. Jason, don't choke your brother. Jason paid no attention. Rick grabbed him by the collar and pulled him off Sam. I said, don't choke him. I wasn't. He asked for it. You want to lose TV tonight? No. Then eat your own hot dog and let your brother eat his. Rick picked up the spoon to feed the baby, but she closed her mouth stubbornly, staring at him with beady little hostile eyes. He sighed. What was it that made kids in high chairs refuse to eat and throw all their toys on the floor? Maybe it wasn't such a good idea for his wife to have gone away, he thought. As for the office, the situation was even worse. His ex-security guy had been humping Lisa, and now that he was out of jail, he was undoubtedly humping her again. That girl had zero taste. If Brad was convicted of pedophilia, that would be bad publicity for the company. But even so, Rick hoped for it. Josh Winkler's wonder drug was apparently killing people. Josh had gone way out on a limb, doing his own unauthorized human testing. But if he was sent to jail, that would reflect badly on the company too. He was poking at his daughter with a spoon when the phone rang, and things became much, much worse. Son of a bitch, Rick Dale turned away from the banks of security screens. I can't believe it, he said on the screens. The hated Brad Gordon was swiping open doors to the labs, touching petri dishes everywhere, and moving on. Brad had been recorded as he went methodically through all the labs in the building. Rick bunched his fists. He came into the building at 1 in the morning. The security temp said he must have had an admin card we didn't know about, because he was disabled. He went to all the storage points and he contaminated every single culture in the Burnett cell line. Rick Dale said, He's an asshole. But there's no problem. We have off-site biostorage in San Jose, London, and Singapore. Actually, those samples were removed yesterday. The security temp said someone picked up the cell lines and left. They had proper authorization. Secure e-transmissions of codes. Who authorized it? You did. It came from your secure account. Oh Christ, he spun. How did that happen? We are working on it. But the cell line, Rick said. We have other sites. Unfortunately, it seems. Where then? We have customers who have leased. I'm afraid we don't. What are you saying? Rick said. He was starting to scream. Are you saying every fucking Burnett culture is gone? And the entire fucking world gone? As far as we know, yes. This is a goddamn disaster. Evidently, this could be the end of my company. That was our safety net. Those cells. We paid a fortune to UCLA for them. You're saying they're gone? Rick frowned angrily as the reality hit him. This is an organized, coordinated attack on my company. They had people in London and Singapore. They had everything arranged. Yes, we believe so. To destroy my company. Possibly. I need to get those cell lines back. Now. No one has them, except, of course, Frank Burnett. Then let's get Burnett. Unfortunately, Mr. Burnett seems to have vanished too. We can't seem to locate him. Great, Rick said. Just great. He turned and yelled to his assistant. Get the fucking lawyers. Get fucking UCLA here. And get everybody here by 8 o'clock tonight. I don't know if... Do it. Chapter 44. Gail Bond fell into a routine. She would spend the night with Yoshi, then come home at 6 in the morning to wake up Evan, give him breakfast, and see him off to school. One morning, as soon as she unlocked the door, she saw that Gerard was gone. His cage stood uncovered in the hallway, his perch unoccupied. Gail swore. She went into the bedroom where Richard was still sleeping. She shook him awake. Richard, where's Gerard? He yawned. What? Gerard. Where's Gerard? I'm afraid there's been an accident. What accident? What have you done? The cage was being cleaned in the kitchen, and the window was open. He flew out. He did not. His wings were clipped. I know that, Richard said, yawning again. He did not fly out. All I can tell you is that I heard Nadezhda shriek, and when I came to the kitchen, she was pointing out the window, and when I looked, the bird was fluttering awkwardly to the ground. Of course I ran downstairs to the street at once, but he was gone. The bastard was trying not to smile. Richard, this is very serious. That is a transgenic animal. If he escapes, he may transmit his genes to other parrots. I am telling you, it was an accident. Where's Nadezhda? She comes in at noon now. I thought I would cut back. Does she has a cell? You hired her, pet. Don't call me pet. I don't know what you have done with that Gray, but this is extremely serious, Richard. He shrugged. I don't know what to tell you. Of course it ruined all her plans. They had intended to publish online the following month, and inevitably there would be cries from around the world that their claim was untrue. Scientists would call it the clever Hans effect, mere mimicry, God knows what else. Everyone would demand to see the bird, and now the bird was gone. I could kill Richard, she said to Maurice, the head of the lab. And I will hire the best advocate for your defense, he said, not smiling. Do you think he knows where the bird is? Probably. But he'll never tell me. He hated Gerard. You're having a custody fight over a bird. I'll talk to Nadezhda. But he has probably paid her off. Did the bird know your name? The name of the lab, phone numbers? No, but he memorized the tones from my cellular phone. He used to make them as a sequences of sounds. Then perhaps he will call us one day, Gail sighed. Perhaps. Chapter 45. Alex Burnett was in the middle of the most difficult trial of her career. A rape case involving the sexual assault of a 2-year-old boy in Malibu. The defendant, 30-year-old Mike Crowley, was a Washington-based political columnist who was visiting his sister-in-law when he experienced an overwhelming urge to have anal sex with her young son, still in diapers. Crowley was a wealthy, spoiled Yale graduate and heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. He hired notorious D.C. attorney Abe, ain't there, Gansler to defend him. It turned out that Crowley's taste in love objects was well known in Washington, but Gansler, as was his custom, tried the case vigorously in the press months before the trial, repeatedly characterizing Alex and the child's mother as fantasizing feminist fundamentalists who had made up the whole thing from their sick, twisted imaginations. This despite a well-documented hospital examination of the child. Crowley's penis was small, but he had still caused significant tears to the toddler's rectum. It was in the midst of frantic preparations for the third day of the trial that Amy, Alex's assistant, buzzed her to say that her father was on the phone. Alex picked up. Pretty busy, Dad. I won't take long. I'm going away for a couple of weeks. Okay, fine. One of the lawyers came in and dropped the latest newspapers on her desk. The Star was running photographs of the raped child, the hospital in Malibu, an unflattering picture of Alex and the kid's mother, squinting in hot sunlight. Where are you going, Dad? Don't know yet, her father said, but I need some time alone. Cell phone probably won't work. I'll send you a note when I get there, in a box of some stuff, in case you need it. Okay, Dad, have fun. She thumbed through the LA Times as she talked to him. For years, the Times had fought for the right to access and print all court documents. However, preliminary, private, or speculative California judges were extremely reluctant to seal even those documents, that involved the home addresses of women being stalked or the anatomical details of children who had been raped. The Times policy of publishing everything also meant that attorneys could put gross and unfounded allegations in their pre-trial filings, knowing the Times would print them. And it invariably did. The public's right to know. Yes, the public really needed to know exactly how long the tear was in the poor little boy's. "You holding up all right?" her father said. "Yeah, Dad, I'm okay." "They're not getting to you." "No. I'm waiting for help from the child welfare organizations. But they're not issuing any statements." Strangely silent. "I'm sure you're shocked by that," he said. "The weasel is politically connected, right?" "Little dickhead, gotta go, Lexi." "Bye, Dad." She turned away. The DNA matches were due today. But they hadn't arrived yet. The samples obtained had been small, and she was worried about what they would show. Chapter 46. The lights dimmed smoothly in the plush presentation room at Silat Annie Cross Ltd., the preeminent London advertising agency. On the screen, an image of an American strip mall, blurred traffic rushing past a wretched cluster of signs. Gavin Cos knew from experience this image was an immediate rapport builder. Anything critical of America was Sophia. American businesses spend more on advertising than any other country in the world, Cos said. Of course they must do, given the quality of American products. Snickers floated through the darkness, and the intelligence of the American audience. Mild, muted laughter. As one of the columnists recently noted, the great majority of Americans couldn't find their own behinds with both hands. Open laughter. They were warming to him. A crude, cultureless people slapping each other on the back as they drift ever deeper into debt. That should suffice, he thought. He changed his tone. But what I wish to draw to your attention is the sheer volume of commercial messages. As you see them, here, arranged in space along the motorway. And every vehicle driving past has its radio on, sending out even more commercial messages. In point of fact, it's estimated that Americans listen to 3,000 messages every day. Or what is more probable, they don't listen to them. Psychologists have determined that the sheer volume of messages creates a kind of anesthesia, which becomes ingrained over time. In a saturated media environment, all messages lose impact. The image changed to Times Square at night, then Shinjuku in Tokyo, then Piccadilly in London. The saturation today is global. Huge messages, including large-screen video, appear in public squares, along motorways, in tube stations, train depots, replace videos at point of sale in retail stores, in toilets, in waiting rooms, pubs and restaurants, in airport lounges, and aboard aircraft. Furthermore, we have conquered personal space, logos, brands and slogans appear on ordinary objects, from knives to tableware to computers. They appear on all our possessions. Consumers wear logos on their clothing, handbags, shoes, jewelry. Indeed, it is rare for a person to appear in public without them. 30 years ago, if anyone predicted that the entire global public would turn themselves into sandwich boards, walking about advertising products, the idea would have seemed fantastical, yet it has happened. The result is an image stick glut, sensory exhaustion, and a diminution of impact. What can we do now? How can we move forward in the new era of technology? The answer may be heretical, but it is this. The screen changed dramatically to a forest image. Huge trees rising toward the sky. Shade beneath. Then a snowy mountain peak. A tropical island. An arc of sand. Crystalline water. Palm trees. And finally an underwater reef with fish swimming among coral heads and sponges. The natural world, Carson intoned, is entirely without advertising. The natural world has yet to be tamed, colonized by commerce. It remains virgin. From the darkness. Isn't that rather the point? Conventional wisdom would put it so. Yes, but conventional wisdom is invariably out of date. Because in the time it has taken to become conventional, to become what everyone believes, the world has moved on. Conventional wisdom is a remnant of the past, and so it is in this case. On the screen, the reef scene was suddenly branded. Coral branches had lettering that read BP Clean. A school of small fish wriggled by each other, making Vodafone. A slithering shark with Cadbury curving across the snout. A pufferfish with Lloyd's TSB Group in black lettering swam over convoluted heads of brain coral, with Scottish Power printed along the ridge in orange. And finally, a moa eel poked its head out of a hole. Its greenish-skinned pattern said, Marks and Spencer. Think of the possibilities, Koss said. The audience was stunned, as he had expected it would be. He pressed on with the argument. The slide now showed a desert scene, with spires of red rock rising against a blue sky lace with clouds. After a moment, the clouds coalesced into a larger misty cloud that hung above the landscape and said, BP means clean power. Those letters, Koss said, are 900 feet high. They stand a quarter of a mile above the landscape. They are clear to the naked eye, and they photograph well. At sunset, they become quite beautiful. The image changed. Here you see their appearance as the sun goes down. The lettering changes from white to pink, to red, and finally deep indigo. So it has the quality, the feeling of being a natural element within the natural landscape. He returned to the original cloud image in daylight. These letters are generated by a marriage of nanoparticles and genetically modified Clostridium perfringens bacteria. The image is in effect a nanoswarm, and it will remain visible in the air for a variable period of time, depending on conditions, just as any cloud would. It may appear for only a few minutes. At other times, it may appear for an hour. It may appear in multiples. On the screen, the fluffy clouds became the BB slogan, repeated infinitely in cloud after cloud, stretching away to the horizon. I think everyone will recognize the impact of this new medium, the natural medium. He had expected spontaneous applause for this dramatic visual, but there was still only silence. In the darkness, yet surely they would be experiencing some sort of reaction by now. An infinitely repeated advert hanging in the sky. Surely it must arouse them. But these clouds are a special case, he said. He returned to the underwater image, fishes moving over the coral reef. In this case, he said, signage and adverts are born by the living creatures themselves through direct genetic modifications of each species. We call this genomic advertising. To capture this new medium, speed is of the utmost importance. There are only a limited number of reef fishes common to tourists' waters. Some fish are more incandescent than others. Many are a bit drab, so we want to choose the best, and the genetic modifications will require patterning the marine animal in each case. Thus, we will patent the Cadbury clownfish, the British Petroleum stag coral, the Marks and Spencer moray eel, the Royal Bank of Scotland angelfish, and, gliding silently overhead, the British Airways manta ray. Koss cleared his throat. Speed matters because we are entering a competitive situation. We want our Cadbury clownfish out there before the clownfish is patented by Hershey's or McDonald's. And we want a strong creature, since in the natural environment, the Cadbury clownfish will compete against ordinary clownfish and hopefully triumph over them. The more successful our patented fish, the more frequently our message shall be seen, and the more completely the original messageless fish will be driven to extinction. We are entering the era of Darwinian advertising. May the best advert win. A cough from the audience. Gavin, forgive me, came a voice. But this appears to be an environmental nightmare. Brand names on fish, slogans in clouds, and what else? Rhinos in Africa that carry the Land Rover logo. If you go about branding animal species, every environmentalist in the world will oppose you. Actually, they will not, Koss said, because we're not suggesting that corporations brand species. We ask corporations to sponsor species as a public service. He paused. Think how many museum exhibitions, theater companies, and symphony orchestras are entirely dependent on corporate sponsorship. Even sections of roadway are sponsored today. Why shouldn't the same philanthropic spirit be directed toward the natural world, which surely would benefit far more than our roads endangered species could be attractively sponsored. Corporations can stake their reputations on the survival of animal species, as they once staked their reputations on the quality of dull television programs. And it is the same for other animals that are not yet endangered. For all the fish in the sea, we are talking about an era of magnificent corporate philanthropy on a global scale. So, this is the Black Rhino brought to you by Land Rover, the Jaguar brought to you by Jaguar. I shouldn't put it so crudely, but yes, that's what we are proposing. The point, he continued, is that this is a win-win situation. A win for the environment, for corporations, and for advertising. Gavin Cost had done hundreds of presentations in his career, and his feelings for the audience had never failed him. He could feel now that this group was not buying it. It was time to bring the lights up and take questions. He stared at the rows of frowning faces. "I admit my notion is radical," he said, "but the world is changing rapidly. Someone is going to do this. This colonization of nature will happen. The only question is, by whom? I urge you to consider this opportunity with the greatest care, and then decide if you want to be a part of it." From the back, Garth Baker, the head of Midlands Media Associates Ltd, stood. "It's quite a novel idea, Gavin," he said, "but I must tell you with some assurance that it will not work." "Oh, why is that?" "Because someone has already done it."